Why do people engage in marketing? Well, it's very simple. From our perspective, every organization we've dealt with, and I've been doing this nearly 30 years, engages with marketing for one reason, and that's revenue. Not likes, not impressions, not awards, not vanity metrics, revenue. Revenue is the main driver as to why people engage with marketing agencies or do marketing themselves to help justify and grow their organizations. So let me ask you something. If that is truly the objective that you have today, and you're here to understand how to generate revenue, why do so many organizations spend time on marketing without understanding the size of the opportunity first? I see this countless times, almost on a weekly basis. When did clarity become a nice to have and not an absolute essential? Again, something that I see. People start tactically deploying things without understanding clarity. That is not going to resonate in the types of results you're looking for, and it's going to waste capital unnecessarily. The reason most teams confuse activity with growth is because they're measuring output, and output seems to be something that is continuously top of mind for organizations. The more we do, the better the results are going to be, as opposed to reverse engineering that and talking about measuring outcomes. People tend to measure emotion or measure motion and celebrate volume, but what we're really looking for here is outcome. That's where most organizations and marketing teams are getting burned right now. They're establishing cadences of delivery mechanisms versus understanding what outcomes they're striving for. So if revenue is truly the goal and clarity on potential is the first step, not ads, not channels, not tactics, but potential, that's where we have to start. So let me take you back to 1984. I didn't start in marketing. I really started on a playground, and I couldn't speak English. When we immigrated to Canada, I was 4 years old, and my folks decided the best place to put me in was an Armenian school. Well, for the next 3 years, all we learned was how to speak Armenian and how to collaborate Armenianly. A few years later, we actually ended up moving to a new community where I transferred schools. I didn't know the language, I didn't know the culture, and I didn't know how to fit in. So what ended up happening was I leaned on what my father used to always tell me, that transactions create connections and they build relationships. So I started making these boondoggle bracelets. I noticed that people liked them. They were kind of the hot new thing at the time. And I sold them for 25 cents each. And I wasn't just really selling bracelets. What I was doing was helping build relationships. I couldn't communicate with words at the time. I couldn't really communicate in any other way other than creating these exchanges. There was something universal about that. When someone hands you a quarter and you hand them something that they want, that moment created trust. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's essentially what we're doing today. It creates interaction, it creates entry, and that's how I made friends as a 7-year-old. Not necessarily with language, but with value. So here we are today, nearly 40 years later, and these are all of these fundamentally taught me a lot of lessons. The entry point, the entire playground wasn't necessarily my market either. That was the potential, but not everyone cared, not everyone had a quarter, not everyone wants in, so I had to figure something out. Who actually wanted these boondoggles? Who has the means to pay me for the boondoggles, and who influences others to draw people to me to get these boondoggles. That was segmentation, that was behavior, and that was psychology. When my boondoggle empire was growing, it hit me. I only had one recess, limited inventory, and limited time. So the real question was, how big is this playground? It was, how many can I realistically sell before the bell rings? So a few months later, my bracelets stopped, not because the opportunities disappeared. I could have sold them probably till I was, wealthy enough to buy enough comic books and gum and candy and all that kind of stuff. But I had found my friends. I had found my footing, and I had built connections without language. My first real business ended, but I didn't realize it at the time. The lessons didn't. They followed me into marketing, into entrepreneurship, and into every strategy, conversation that I've had to date. Here's why it matters to you. Most businesses are trying to sell before they create connections. They assume demand instead of earning it. They chase volume before understanding behavior. And marketing isn't about shouting louder. We see it today with everything going on with social media and channels like SEO, paid. It's about volume and shouting. But really, when you want to create value, it has to translate, just like it did for me on the playground at a very young age. The fundamentals haven't changed. Language changes, technology changes, sure, and platforms change. But human behavior remains the same. We exchange value, we look for belonging, we respond to relevance, and that's where marketing truly begins. So today we're going to walk through the 3 steps. And everything I just shared boils down to these 3 disciplines. Potential, number 1. Performance, number 2. And progression, number 3. If you skip step 1, step 2 gets very expensive, and I'll show you how. If you rush to step 2, step 3 never compounds. Most organizations start at step 2, performance. They buy ads, they hire agencies, they change platforms, they add on a new thing, perhaps, but they never validate potential. And that is what is truly missing with most executions. Execution ends up turning into noise, so we're going to tighten that up. This framework isn't complicated, and I'm going to walk you through it. It's all about being disciplined. Define what realistically is winnable, step 1. Step 2, execute with precision. And step 3, scale with what's been proven. That's it. But almost no one follows that order, and that's the big problem. So today I'm going to walk you through these. So before we talk about channels, before we talk about execution, before we talk about budgets, we need to orient ourselves a little bit. Most marketing problems don't start with bad execution. They start with the unclear potential. Most teams don't wake up saying, we're going to guess something today and execute. But they actually do. They guess at market size, buyer intent, conversion potential, timing, competitive density. And then they're surprised when performance feels chaotic, marketing feels hard, because the systems that they've integrated have constraints. Not checklist and constraints, but they do not have clarity. When I'm selling those bracelets, when I was selling those bracelets, if I'd assumed every kid would buy one of those, I would have made too many. If I thought recess lasted forever, I would have misallocated my time. If I ignored who actually wanted them, I would have wasted energy chasing the wrong kids. The playground looked big, but my opportunity wasn't. That's potential. That's not ambition or intuition. It's shape. You have to shape and understand who your audience is. These numbers don't exist to limit our ambitions. They exist to give our ambition structure. So when we talk about potential, we're really talking about these 3 key lenses. And this is what I need you all to dial into today. TAM, SAM, and SOM. These acronyms are extremely powerful, and we're going to walk through them today. They are 3 filters, they are 3 reductions, and they're 3 levels of discipline. If you don't size the playground properly, you will always blame execution. So let's talk about TAM. For those of you who may know it, great. For those of you who don't, that's what I'm here to educate you on today. Before anyone builds anything in this agency or the organizations we work with, before budgets are set, before timelines are agreed to, there's a question every leadership team needs to answer. Whether they realize it or not, is this a real opportunity or just an interesting idea? Trust me when I tell you, I've come across a lot of interesting ideas. When you do the research, you find out very quickly that nobody's going to buy your product or service. That's what TAM exists to clarify. TAM is the total addressable market. TAM answers one question. Is the opportunity even worth the attention? Not execution, not channels, attention. On the playground, TAM was simple for me. How many kids are even in the school? If there are 500 students, for example, and only 20 wear my bracelets, that changes everything. The playground may look big. The opportunities might not be. Now, tightening that execution framework is really what we're looking at here. TAM is not about ambition. It defines the outer boundaries of what are possible. It tells you whether or not you're building a lemonade stand or a global distribution engine like Coca-Cola. But here's the trap. Most teams inflate TAM emotionally and they say, everybody needs this. Everyone doesn't need what you do. You've got to realize that very, very early. TAM is constrained by geography, access, regulation, distribution, category relevance, and a bunch of other things that you have to identify. So no, you're not for everybody. If you overstate TAM, you will overbuild. And if you overbuild, you're likely going to be losing capital and potentially even shutting the doors. You'll blame marketing, as we hear often. So once we know the size and the playground, we have to ask the harder question. Who actually cares? And that's where SAM comes into the equation. Now, SAM, unlike TAM, SAM is the service addressable market. TAM tells us how big the playground is, where SAM tells us a harder question. Who can we actually reach? Not theoretically, but operationally. SAM filters ambition through constraints, geographically, through distribution, through budget, sales capacity, channel access, and regulatory barriers. These exist. These are real things that we have to take into consideration. This is where ego usually enters the room. Because once you define SAM, you have to admit not everyone is yours. A very, very difficult thing for people to admit. And to us, that's a very healthy thing to understand. On the playground, TAM was every student in the school. But SAM, it was the kids at recess on my side of the yard who had quarters in their pockets who liked bracelets. So you could see how I'm starting to distill this down from the total market to the market that I can actually capture. This is called reduction. And reduction creates a lot more focus than trying to address everybody and assuming everybody is our customer. You might have a global TAM, but if your sales team only covers North America, for example, your SAM is actually North America, not the planet. You might have millions of potential buyers, but if your price points exclude 80% of them, your SAM just shrank. Again, clarity. SAM forces honesty, and honesty prevents overextension and wasted capital. Most teams skip this step. They define TAM, or never do. Then they jump straight to performance. They run ads into markets they can't service. They generate leads they can't fulfill. They create demand they can't capture. And then they blame marketing. So once we know who we can realistically reach, the final question becomes, how much of that can we actually capture? That's where SOM comes in. SOM, I'll get to in a second, but essentially we've defined the playground, we've defined who we can actually reach. Now comes the most important question that leaders tend to avoid. How much can we realistically win? And the key there is realistically. That's SOM, the service obtainable market. How much of the market can we obtain? That's not the whole market, not the reachable market. It's what we can capture, given competition, given budgets, given timing, given brand strength, and given execution. This is where ambition and logic meet on the playground. Even if 40 kids liked my bracelets, I wasn't selling to all 40. Some would buy from someone else, some would wait, some would ignore me, some didn't have the money. So the real number was, how many can I sell before the bell rings? That was my SOM. That was my performance ceiling. Now, bringing it into business, if you have a SAM, let's say, of 10,000 potential buyers, and you're not going to be winning all 10,000, you are competing for the share of those 10,000, and your SOM depends on sales capacity, conversion rate, marketing efficiency, competitive density, and brand authority. SOM forces realism, and realism prevents overpromising and underdelivering. Most organizations build plans based on TAM, they forecast based on SAM, but they execute in a world governed by SOM. And the gap is where capital disappears. And the last thing most people I speak to want is to burn unnecessary money without necessarily yielding the results. If you size SOM correctly, budget becomes very rational, expectations become disciplined, execution becomes focused, and progression becomes very measurable. And now this is the number that you can actually all walk all the way to the bank. So this is a science. This isn't intuition. This isn't gut. The numbers tell us what we can actually capture, and that's what everybody should be working towards. So you start with TAM, you look at SAM, and you go to SOM, and you start distilling this down into realistic outcomes that your organization wants to work towards. Now, that's not the end of it. So walking away with my bag of quarters at the time, as I said, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I knew that this wasn't the end. So now that we've defined the potential, which is step one, understanding the potential of your business, now we have to integrate the opportunity. We've sized the opportunity correctly. What are the things that we need to do in order to ensure we're getting performance? And performance, much like TAM, SAM, and SOM, are governed by three key levers. And these are the three key levers I would encourage you to make sure you keep a close eye on. They are: how much qualified traffic are you generating? And that can come from a variety of different channels, whether it be organic, paid, social, email, omnichannel, billboard, television, radio, Spotify, you name it. You have to measure how much traffic you're generating, and a layer above that is qualified traffic. How much of that traffic are you actually converting? Most of the websites we go to these days have a form, phone number, maybe landing pages. How much of that is actually converting? You need to know that conversion metric. It's a very important thing. We'll get into that later. And whether the economics actually work. So the three levers that you need to pay close attention to are traffic, conversion, and the economics. That's the triangle. Not followers, not impressions, not brand awareness, or any other vanity metric that you think is important. These levers are what are going to provide mechanical growth. Most businesses obsess over traffic. I see it every single day. How much traffic did I get? Did it lead to more leads, more clicks, more reach? But if your conversion is broken, pillar number two or lever number two, traffic is just magnifying inefficiency. And if you don't know how to look at that data, that's problematic because you're likely making a big investment into a lever that you can't pull on. And even if traffic and conversion are working seamlessly, if the economics don't support scale, you're also running into a major issue. And that typically means you're burning a lot of unnecessary capital. You don't have a growth engine. You might have a temporary spike, but those three key pillars are really something I have to ingrain and grill into this audience today. Traffic, conversion, economics, we need to go deep into that. Traffic, for me, was kids walking around at recess in the playground. Conversion was how many bought bracelets from me. And my economics, did selling bracelets for a quarter make sense given the time and material I had to invest in to make a quarter? If I doubted traffic, if I doubled traffic but nobody bought, that's not growth. If everyone bought but I spent too much time making them, that's not growth either. Same triangle with different scale, performance, and creativity. This is where mathematics comes in and science comes into marketing. Traffic times conversion equals economics. And I'll walk through all of that. That produced and here we go. My phone's ringing. Can you believe it? I have my timer on my phone and here I am ringing. I'm going to cancel that. So breaking any one of these is going to collapse your system. So strengthening all three progressions becomes non-negotiable. It's absolutely essential to your success. And we're going to walk through each and every one. So traffic. Traffic is really designed to be attention with intent. I mentioned getting qualified traffic. And the only way you're going to get qualified traffic, which is another talk I'll do in the future, is understanding who your audience is, which is another key flaw. But for today, let me say that again. Traffic is in attention with intent. That means you're capturing the attention and attracting the audiences that want to do business with your products or services that you offer. These are not impressions. This is not visibility. This is qualified attention. Traffic is the entry point. If no one is walking into a store, nothing else matters. You can have 1,000 people drive by your shop. If nobody's entering, it makes no difference. Most organizations think traffic alone is what equals growth, but it doesn't. Traffic magnifies whatever system it enters. If conversion is weak, traffic is definitely magnifies waste. And if economics are broken, traffic accelerates losses. Let's assume you do 20 deals and it's 200,000 in revenue, and you double that traffic to, that was 2,000 visitors to your product or website at a 2% conversion rate. Now, if you did 40 deals, which generated $400,000 in revenue, looks very impressive. But the real question that people tend to miss is, what did it cost to double my traffic? If you had doubled ad spend, for example, and your cost per acquisition stayed flat, you didn't increase efficiency per se, you increased the expense. Now that's the big distinction that is being missed in the market today. Now, what if we could keep the traffic at where it was, improve conversion by 2 to 4%, and you go from 20 deals to 40 deals without doubling a single penny of spend? That is engineering. That is engineering that traffic, that is optimizing the conversions, and that's where you get leverage. More revenue and profit coming in, less going out, delivering much more flexibility for that business. Can you imagine if you're spending less, making more, all of the options and opportunities that open up for you? It's quite tremendous, but this is where conversion comes in. The second stage in the triangle. Traffic can get very expensive, as most of you who've done marketing know. Conversion is really looking at the engineering of how the website, the landing page, the mechanism you have to generate leads is being leveraged, and why you're not converting or converting. You don't necessarily buy better conversion, you actually design it. You fix messaging clarity, offer strength, objection, you remove friction, you create trust signals, and you have sales alignment. I'll give you a quick example. I was on a website yesterday and they had me sold. I was ready to buy from them. It was a simple thing that I was looking for. I went to the first website I saw. Aesthetically, it was great. Then they took me through 9 different stages to try to get me to fill in a form, and they kept asking me questions, and it was nightmarish. I hit the back button. I went to the next competitor that they had. Simple 2-step process. Boom, boom, boom. Signed up. The first company actually lost an opportunity because they didn't fix the design. They didn't design conversion to speak to me as one of their ideal clients, which I thought I was, and they lost an opportunity. And I can assure you, if you look at the traffic you're getting, and if you're established and set up for conversion responsibly, you will reduce the amount of loss and you'll see a bump in your conversion. Most companies really in 2026 don't have a traffic problem. They have a persuasion problem. If 100 kids walk past me, that didn't guarantee me 100 sales. If only 2 out of the 100 bought, that was a conversion issue. Maybe the colors of my boondoggles weren't attractive. Maybe the value wasn't clear. Maybe they didn't see the social proof. Maybe they didn't feel the urgency before the bell rang. If I made the bracelets more desirable, more kids bought, the same traffic, higher yield, but I needed to pay attention and understand that the colors that I was designing of the bracelets weren't attractive. So this is a part that people miss. They don't necessarily know what's not working. Traffic is going to scale exposure. Conversion is going to scale efficiency. And here's the real danger. If conversion is broken and you scale traffic, you're scaling waste. You may be able to get more traffic coming to your landing pages, your website, whatever, your social channels. But if you can't convert that, into clients, then you're burning time and money and you're wasting potentially a lot of capital. That's why that's where most companies burn money. So increase traffic before conversion, but even if we fix traffic and we fix conversion, there's one more key constraint that we need to ensure we talk about. Does the math actually support the reputation and the scalability? So here's the third pillar, or the third part of the triangle: economics. So 1,000 visitors at a 2% conversion is 20 brand new customers. Then we improve conversion to 4%, which gets you 40 new customers. Now the room feels good, but here's the uncomfortable question you got to ask yourself: what did it cost me to acquire 40 customers? Because performance is not revenue. It's profitable revenue. It costs $500, let's say hypothetically, to acquire a customer, and your average profit per customer was $600. You technically made money, but you made $100 per customer. It's fairly thin, I would say, if most business owners out there would agree. Spending $500 to make $600 typically doesn't fly. Because this is where the economics comes in and plays an important role. Traffic gets you the attention, as we discussed. Conversion is persuasion, but economics is true viability. If your cost to acquire is higher than your lifetime value, you don't have a growth engine at all. What you have is a slow bleed that you're not paying attention to. And inevitably, that's going to catch up to you either through wasted capital or potentially shutting down your enterprise. If each bracelet cost me 15 cents in materials, 10 minutes of my time, and I sold it for a quarter, at some point I would have done the math and realized I wasn't building a business, I was just building friendships, which was the goal at the time. I mean, I was 7 years old. And once I had friends, I actually shut down my business. I didn't want to make bracelets anymore. I was a little older, a little wiser, and now I can start to communicate. Not because the demand disappeared. The bracelets were still a hot ticket and some other people started making their own. Not because traffic slowed down. The school had the same number of students in the school. And not because conversion dropped, because the economics didn't justify me continuing anymore. I had achieved my objective. I had made my friends. And now the margin wasn't worth the effort anymore. So I exited, and that was probably the cleanest exit strategy to date that I can think of. So aside from that, those three key numbers and those three key objectives, there are some key things that every business owner or business needs to be crystal clear on. And we're going to talk about them. The first one being the average client value. I ask this question every time I sit with any prospect or an existing client. I say, hey, tell me, what is your average client worth? And I can't get a direct number. Rarely ever. We start getting into theoretical breakdowns. If this were to happen, I think the client, what we need to understand is what is every average client worth to us? These three numbers are going to decide whether or not marketing is or isn't working. Most teams never look at them, and when that expectation breaks and we don't know what we're looking at, we're going to make some really bad decisions. The ACV is the average revenue you earn from a single client over a defined period of time. So we could talk about retainer clients, one-time purchases, so on and so forth. We need to understand that number, and by understanding that number, we'll make much healthier decisions. It gives you a baseline to understand what each new client is worth to your business. So you can start to quantify, if I were to secure 20 more clients or 40 more clients or 10,000 more clients, what sort of revenue should I be expecting and how can I forecast that? We'll get into forecasting in a second. Another attribute here that gets dismissed, which I haven't added to the three because I wanted to keep today relatively straightforward, was LTV. LTV is the lifetime value of that client. So you may get a client, perhaps your businesses are based on retention, where you're billing them every month. So you got some sort of monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. Well, if you're charging $1,000 a month to your client and you maintain them for 60 months, the lifetime value of that client is actually $60,000. If you're doing your job well and you're creating these quantifiable models, you should be able to forecast how much revenue you're going to generate, whether it's a one-time capital sale or a sort of retainer or subscription model. So LTV is actually very important. The second one is what I like to refer to as CRP. Now, which stands for close rate percentage. This is where marketing and sales typically collide. The marketing team says, yeah, we drove all these leads to you. And the sales team says, no, you didn't drive anything to us. The reality is they probably didn't close the deals that marketing brought in, or there's a misalignment of what sales feels is a qualified opportunity versus what marketing feels is a qualified opportunity. When these opportunities show up, no one really wins. If your CRP is relatively low, there has to be mechanisms to improve either its conversion, bringing in the right types of audiences, or helping support that sales team to improve the overall pipeline. Very few companies that I've worked with really obsess over close rate, but close rate is where you have leverage. If your close rate is 10% and you need 10 opportunities to win one deal, if your close rate is 25%, you only need 4 opportunities to win one deal. So you could see the difference there. And when you understand close rate percentages, you understand really how much traffic and conversion do I need to drive for my sales team to actually justify the economics of this marketing initiative. So let's say hypothetically you have 100 qualified leads and a 20% close rate with a $50,000 ACV, average client value. That's 20 deals, $1 million in revenue. Imagine now increasing that close rate to 30%. Same 100 leads, 30 deals closed instead of the 20. You now generated $1.5 million in revenue. No additional traffic, no additional spend, just improving on your close rate. So CRP, where that suffers is when messaging doesn't align with sales conversion, expectations are set incorrectly from the very beginning by marketing, targeting is too broad, pricing and positioning are wrong, unclear. I've seen it all the time. I don't know how much I'm paying for this thing. So you go down this rabbit hole of trying to identify what something costs, and you just ended up bouncing. And sales enablement is generally weak. CRP is rarely just a sales problem. And I say that again, CRP is rarely just a sales problem. It's often qualification and a positioning problem upstream. Close rate reveals the quality of your opportunities. If your close rate is low, you either are attracting the wrong audiences, positioning poorly, or failing at execution, or all of the above. CRP really exposes alignment. Again, alignment with marketing, alignment with sales. All things that can be very easily mitigated, typically speaking through modeling, what I just walked you through, TAM, SAM, SOM, traffic, conversion, economics, average client value, understanding that, your CRP, understanding that, and your TTC. Your TTC tells you how long your capital is trapped. We see this a lot with B2B businesses. So TTC answers this one critical question. How long does it take from the first engagement to signed revenue? If you are in the B2B space, you may take 6 months to a year before you close that opportunity. So we can't really recognize that revenue until that 6-month window hits. So we're driving good traffic, we're converting that traffic into sales qualified opportunities, but the balance sheet isn't going to show that revenue is being recognized until the 6-month period, if that's in fact what it takes. So how long is capital tied up for those 6 months? I mean, if you can imagine, if you've got sales teams, a production line, all of those things, if you're struggling with understanding your time to close, you really need to define that, because it is part of the formula to appreciate whether or not your marketing is truly working. If your cash flow lags, your marketing investment compounds slower, your forecasting becomes fragile, TTC is what determines velocity. And we need to know the velocity from the initial contact to the time this thing actually is signed off and revenue starts being recognized. So together, this is what truly defines the revenue momentum. When you combine ACV, LTV, CRP, and TTC, and I know those are a lot of acronyms, but if you've jotted these down, I can assure you, if you start reviewing each of these metrics and start modeling them, you will see a lot more success with your marketing dollars. You're no longer talking about marketing performance. You're talking about revenue, a revenue machine that's determining the scalability of your business. So here's the equation. In simple terms, how many real chances have you created? How valuable is each win? And how often do you win? So take this formula down, jot it down, and start creating these equations. Given this grounded example, let's say you create 40 qualified opportunities, your average deal is worth 25 grand. You close 25% of them, and it takes you 30 days to close. The business compounds quite quickly, no change, just one variable, same numbers, but it takes 120 days to close. You didn't lose deals per se, you lost momentum. That's another variable that most teams really never diagnose. Look at all of these variables because they're integral. And you can pull, if you know how to leverage analytics, that's one aspect of it, but most people understand where to pull numbers about their business. One of the exercises that's really simple to do is, if you want to keep it simple, pull out your sales for the last 12 months. If you had 50 of them and each one was worth, $1,000, great. You did $50,000 in 12 months, quantify it and say, what is my average deal worth? You'll start generating these numbers that can start modeling how you better appreciate whether or not your marketing is working for you or if you're just burning unnecessary capital. The third and final stage in all of this is progression. This is what happens when you have stability in your marketing and you're seeing success. You can apply more pressure. So you validated traffic, you validated conversion, economics, close rates, and time to close. Now the real question becomes, do we increase the intensity? One of the things I always say is, do we double down? Progression is not experimentation at this point. You've proven that your experiment has worked. Things are happening and momentum is being created. Progression is when you amplify that. And you do that through two variables. You go back and you appreciate what's my service addressable market and my service obtainable market. And if there is still a big piece of the pie that you can capture, if you've identified something that is working, you double down. You double down. This is the decision. This isn't emotional at this point, it's confidence. And confidence that your marketing is working, you're seeing growth, you know what levers have been pulled to ensure growth, and now your close rates are more predictable, your client acquisition costs are stable, your LTV supports your scale, and your time to close is manageable. So when those hold, you immediately increase spend, you increase capacity, and you increase exposure. This doubling down model we've done countless times. We could run at any given quarter, we're running hundreds of experiments for our clients. The ones that are working, we're telling our clients, if we've identified a viable market for them, we want to double down because the math supports it. And that's how you should really look at increasing increasing your investment in marketing. You don't scale with what feels excited. Oftentimes we see something great that we've designed or developed. It may not necessarily resonate with your audience. So we scale what's repeatable. So we double down on everything that's repeatable that we've identified that has worked historically. It's not to say set it and forget it. Keep a close eye on it because economies change, people's behavior changes. But if we know something is working, we let it run. We double down, we triple down, and we keep a very close eye on it to ensure we're still seeing the trajectory increase. The second thing is when you double down on something that works, gains multiply very quickly. If traffic improves, conversion improves, close rate improves, each lever is designed to amplify the other. So small disciplined actions will really gain and stack. And stacking gains accelerates really quickly. That's what compounding is. So if you have subscription models or retainer models, what other things can we add or suggest that the clients may require to start seeing this compound? It's not necessarily about doing more things. It's about doing the right things with increased force without breaking the economics. We have to keep a close eye on the capital and the economics in each of these. So here's what my ask of you is. If you are here because you want some accountability, you want to take something away that you can apply today, here's what I ask of you in the next 7 days. You've validated traffic, you've validated conversion economics and close rate. Now, how are we going to intensify? So, size, number one, first thing I'm going to ask you to do is size up your potential and stop guessing. Don't assume that everybody wants what you do. Try to identify who your target is, who your audience is, and how you're going to get in front of that. Most of the time, guessing leads to, as I mentioned, wasted capital. Nobody likes to waste money. So identify and size up the potential of what service or products you have to offer to the market and ensure you understand that. This is your TAM, SAM and SOM. Find the conversion choke points and start performing. What are you doing today? What channels are you on? What is and isn't working? We hear often as marketers, I need to be on this channel and that channel and this other channel. It's fine and dandy if you have unlimited budget and capability, but it could also be a waste of time and a lack of focus. So when we're finding conversion points, we want to make sure that we're putting our efforts and energy on the areas that will actually work for you. If you're a B2B business that sells to other B2Bs and you're talking to senior executives, there's a high likelihood you're not going to be doing TikTok videos. There's a high likelihood you should be on LinkedIn. So if you're putting your energy in the wrong places, you really need to start looking at the opportunities to finding those choke points, looking at what's wasting your time, and start refocusing to start performing. Traffic, conversion, economics. Lastly, once you've confirmed all that, it's doubling down. Challenge your agencies, challenge your marketing teams. Ask them, say, what has worked for us in the past 6 months, past 12 months, past 24 months? Ask these sorts of questions of your teams, because if nothing's worked, then we've got a problem. But if there will surely be a golden nugget somewhere in there of something that has been working that we haven't capitalized on or you haven't taken advantage of, meaning you haven't doubled down. So ensure that you ask what has worked, and if there's more market opportunity, to double down on that thing, because it should naturally lead you to greater opportunities and more revenue flow. That's it for me, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you all being here today, taking valuable time out of your day to sit with me. I believe that's it for me. I appreciate everything. Go Team Canada if you're watching the Olympics. If you're tuning in from around the world, go Team Canada. Hockey team, we're encouraging them. So I don't know if there's any questions right now or anybody has anything they want to ask me. Yeah, those are the key three takeaways: potential, performance, progression. Thank you very much.